I tend to faint. I mean, those remarks were just full of hostility. Because, I mean, you know, if I'd listened to those people, I would have gone out there on stage, I wouldn't have been able to hear anything, and I would have fainted. But the hostility was completely inappropriate, because, in fact, those people liked me. I mean, that hostility was just some feeling that was, you know, left over from some previous experience. Because somehow in our social existence today, we're only allowed to express our feelings weirdly and indirectly. If you express them directly, everybody goes crazy.
It on for anything. First, I'd be worried I might get electrocuted. No, I don't trust technology. But I mean, the main thing, Wally, is that I think that kind of comfort just separates you from reality in a very direct way.
You mean?
I mean, if you don't have that electric blanket and your apartment is cold and you need to put on another blanket or go into the closet and pile up coats on top of the blanket you have, well, then you know it's cold. And that sets up a link of things. You have compassion for well, is the person next to you cold? Are there other people in the world who are cold? What a cold night. I like the cold. My God, I never realized. I don't want a blanket. It's fun being cold. I can snuggle up against you even more because it's cold. All sorts of things occur to you. Turn on that electric blanket and it's like taking a tranquilizer. It's like being lobotomized by watching television. I think you enter the dream world again. I mean, what does it do to us, Wally, living in an environment where something as massive as the seasons, or winter or cold, don't in any way affect us? I mean, we're animals after all. I mean, what does that mean? I think that means that instead of living under the sun and the moon and the sky and the stars, we're living in a fantasy world of our own making.
I mean, really, tell me, why do we require a trip to Mount Everest in order to be able to perceive one moment of reality? I mean, is Mount Everest more real than New York? I mean, isn't New York real? I mean, you see, I think if you could become fully aware of what existed in a cigar store next door to this restaurant, I think it would just blow your brains out. I mean, isn't there just as much reality to be perceived in the cigar store as there is on Mount Everest? I mean, what do you think? You see, I think that not only is there nothing more real about Mount Everest, I think there's nothing that different in a certain way. I mean, because reality is uniform in a way, so that if your perceptions are, if your own mechanism is operating correctly, it would become irrelevant to go to Mount Everest and sort of absurd, because of course, on some level, obviously it's very different from a cigar store on 7th Avenue. But
Well, I agree with you, Wally. But the problem is that people can't see the cigar store now. I mean, things don't affect people the way they used to. I mean, it may very well be that 10 years from now, people will pay $10,000 in cash to be castrated just in order to be affected by something.
Well, why do you think that is? I mean, why is that? I mean, is it just because people are lazy today, or they're bored? I mean, are we just like bored, spoiled children who've just been lying in the bathtub all day, just playing with their plastic duck, and now they're just thinking, well, what can I do?
Okay, yes. We're bored. We're all bored now. But has it ever occurred to you, Wally, that the process that creates this boredom that we see in the world now may very well be a self-perpetuating, unconscious form of brainwashing created by a world totalitarian government based on money, and that all of this is much more dangerous than one thinks, and it's not just a question of individual survival, Wally, but that somebody who's bored is asleep, and somebody who's asleep will not say no? See, I keep meeting these people. I mean, just a few days ago, I met this man whom I greatly admire. He's a Swedish physicist, Gustav Bjornstrand, and he told me that he no longer watches television, he doesn't read newspapers, and he doesn't read magazines. He's completely cut them out of his life because he really does feel that we're living in some kind of Orwellian nightmare now, and that everything that you hear now contributes to turning you into a robot. And when I was at Findhorn, I met this extraordinary English tree expert who had devoted his life to saving trees. He just got back from Washington, lobbying to save the redwoods. He's 84 years old. He always travels with a backpack because he never knows where he's going to be tomorrow. And when I met him at Findhorn, he said to me, "Where are you from?" And I said, "New York." He said, "Ah, New York, yes, that's a very interesting place. Do you know a lot of New Yorkers who keep talking about the fact that they want to leave but never do?" And I said, "Oh, yes." And he said, "Why do you think they don't leave?" I gave him different banal theories. He said, "Oh, I don't think it's that way at all." He said, "I think that New York is the new model for the new concentration camp, where the camp has been built by the inmates themselves, and the inmates are the guards, and they have this pride in this thing they've built. They've built their own prison, and so they exist in a state of schizophrenia, where they are both guards and prisoners, and as a result, they no longer have, having been lobotomized, the capacity to leave the prison they've made, or to even see it as a prison." And then he went into his pocket and he took out a seed for a tree, and he said, "This is a pine tree." He put it in my hand and he said, "Escape before it's too late."
I mean, really, tell me, why do we require a trip to Mount Everest in order to be able to perceive one moment of reality? I mean, is Mount Everest more real than New York? I mean, isn't New York real? I mean, you see, I think if you could become fully aware of what existed in the cigar store next door to this restaurant, I think it would just blow your brains out. I mean, isn't there just as much reality to be perceived in the cigar store as there is on Mount Everest? I mean, what do you think? You see, I think that not only is there nothing more real about Mount Everest, I think there's nothing that different in a certain way. I mean, because reality is uniform in a way, so that if your perceptions are, if your own mechanism is operating correctly, it would become irrelevant to go to Mount Everest and sort of absurd because, of course, on some level, obviously it's very different from a cigar store on 7th Avenue.
Well, I agree with you, Wally. But the problem is that people can't see the cigar store now. Things don't affect people the way they used to. It may very well be that 10 years from now, people will pay $10,000 in cash to be castrated just in order to be affected by something.
Well, why do you think that is? Why is that? Is it just because people are lazy today or they're bored? Are we just like bored, spoiled children who've just been lying in the bathtub all day, just playing with their plastic duck, and now they're just thinking, well, what can I do?
Okay, yes. We are bored. We're all bored now. But has it ever occurred to you, Wally, that the process that creates this boredom that we see in the world now may very well be a self-perpetuating, unconscious form of brainwashing created by a world totalitarian government based on money, and that all of this is much more dangerous than one thinks, and it's not just a question of individual survival, Wally, but that somebody who's bored is asleep, and somebody who's asleep will not say no?
Now, this vision of a universe arranged in harmonies of sounds and relations is no new discovery. Today, physicists are simply proving that what we call an object, an atom, a molecule, a particle, is only an approximation, a metaphor. At the subatomic level, it dissolves into a series of interconnections, like chords of music. It's beautiful.
Yeah, but there are boundaries, aren't there? Between you and me, for instance. We are two separate bodies, aren't we? That's not an illusion.
At the subatomic level, there is a continual exchange of matter and energy between my hand and this wood, between the wood and the air, and even between you and me. A real exchange of photons and electrons. Ultimately, whether we like it or not, we're all part of one inseparable web of relationships.
Well, the brain receives billions of signals every minute, and out of them we select a small portion and make a picture which we project outside and consider reality. That's our reality tunnel. That's our reality tunnel. A mosquito comes in the window. A mosquito will perceive an entirely different reality tunnel than a dog. A dog will perceive a different reality tunnel than a human being. Everybody does it differently. That's why no two people ever perceive the same interlude of time. If you set a watch and then stop it and ask them how long it was, they'll guess anything from 15 seconds to 4 minutes. If you ask them what color something is, some will say green and some will say blue. And this is why the first problem in learning Zen Buddhism is generally to identify the great master who makes the grass green.
Who is the master who makes the grass green?
Who is the master who makes... Well, I happen to be the CEO of the Committee for Surrealist Investigation of Claims of the Normal, and we actually are offering $10,000 to anybody who can produce anything that's totally normal in all respects, or even average. And then the normalists all claim that they got something that they can demonstrate. They call it the normal. They never can produce it. It's a mathematical abstraction. You try to find a normal dog, a normal human being, a normal Irishman, a normal Portuguese, a normal American. You can't find them. There is no such thing. But everything turns out to be uniquely itself and uniquely perverted from the norm.
Who is the master who makes the grass green?
Well, it has to do with language, as Nietzsche pointed out. It gets tiresome to say this leaf, that leaf, the next leaf, leaf number 4, leaf number 5, so we say leaves. And then sooner or later some asshole like Plato comes along and says that leaves really exist. And they don't realize we created them. So the reality isn't haunted by the abnormal or the paranormal. The normal has been invented by a process of self-hypnosis and creative imagination.
Who is the master who makes the grass green?
The master who makes the grass green. That's our reality tunnel. Oh yeah, every reality tunnel is reinforced by a particular vocabulary. In Northern Ireland, there's a city that's called Derry by the Catholics and Londonderry by the Protestants. You say Derry in one part of town and the Protestants will shoot you. You say Londonderry in the other part of town, the Catholics will shoot you. And that's only one illustration. You go around the world, you find a million illustrations like that. People are entirely hypnotized by the words they use, and they want everybody else to use the same words too. The world is full of people who are killing one another over who has the right reality tunnel. As Noble Drew Ali said, if you let other people define reality for you, you are living in a world that is called hell. It's when you start creating your own reality that you can create a heaven.
Who is the master who makes the grass green? Who is the master who makes the grass green?
Who is the master who makes the grass green? If you're Van Gogh, you live in a world with cats that look like this. If you're not Van Gogh, your cat shouldn't look like this. The sad man lives in a sad world. The happy man lives in a happy world. The angry person lives in an angry world. At the end of the valley of decision, there is always choice. Reality is what you can get away with. If you can't get away with it, it ain't real.
Hello?
Excuse me, do you rule the universe?
I try not to. Are you wet?
Wet? Well, doesn't it look as if we're wet?
That's how it looks to me, but how you feel about it might be a different matter. If you find warmth makes you feel dry, you'd better come in.
Sure.
Oh, that's
fine.
nice.
Thank you.
It's very kind. Just
What, here? Man, what's your name?
I don't know. Why, do you think I ought to have one? It seems odd to give a bundle of vague sensory perceptions a name.
Listen, we must ask you some questions.
All right. You can sing to my cat if you like.
Would he like that?
You'd better ask him that.
How long have you been ruling the universe?
Ah, this is a question about the past, is it?
Yes.
How can I tell that the past isn't a fiction designed to account for the discrepancy between my immediate physical sensations and my state of mind?
Do you answer all questions like this?
I say what it occurs to me to say when I think I hear people say things. More I cannot say.
Oh, that clears it up. He's a weirdo.
No, listen. People come to you, yes?
I think so.
And they ask you to take decisions about wars, about economies, about people, about everything going on out there in the universe.
I only decide about my universe. My universe is what happens to my eyes and ears. Anything else is surmise and hearsay. For all I know, these people may not exist. You may not exist. I say what it occurs to me to say.
But don't you see? What you decide affects the fate of millions of people.
I don't know them. I've never met them. They only exist in words I think I hear. The men who come to me say, so-and-so wants to declare what we call a war. These are the facts. What do you think? And I say. But it's folly to say you know what is happening to other people. Only they know, if they exist.
Do you think they do?
I have no opinion. How can I have?
Look, but don't you see that people live or die on your word?
It's nothing to do with me. I am not involved with people. The Lord knows I am not a cruel man.
You say the Lord. So you believe in...
My cat. I call him the Lord. I am kind to him.
All right. How do you know he exists? How do you know he knows you to be kind, or enjoys what you think of as your kindness?
I don't. I have no idea. It merely pleases me to behave in a certain way to what appears to be a cat. What else do you do? Please, I am tired.
Now, Kant was the one to reject every last remnant of the primacy of existence. According to Kant, it was not the function of reason to grasp existence. Concepts and percepts are completely cut off from the world and function within a realm of the mind's own creation.
Hello and welcome to this video in which I hope to contribute something to the Flat Earth debate with the help of this inspirational lady, Dame Ellen MacArthur, who in 2005 set a new world speed record for single-handedly circumnavigating the globe, which is the global version of it, although I never really bought into the hype about it, because when you look at the map of where she sailed, and this is the only one I can find on the internet nowadays, you can see that she set off from Britain, she sailed past Africa and around Antarctica, back again, which on this map looks okay until you consider that Antarctica is the narrowest part at the bottom of the globe. It's not the same as sailing around the equator, which is what I'm sure most people would think of as circumnavigation. She set off from Britain, sailed through the Atlantic to Antarctica, which you can't see on this map, and back again. Now, it's quite a long way, but it's not circumnavigation. if she'd come around the equator, then she would have crossed the vast expanse of the Pacific. If you look down at the bottom of this globe, you can just make out Antarctica. But to sail around that bit there is never going to be the equivalent of sailing around the Pacific. And that's not even the whole Pacific. If you look at Hawaii just there, if you were to swivel it around, there's Hawaii. So you've still got all of this Pacific to go, even if you take a shortcut through the Panama Canal and then around the Atlantic, which would be fine. That would be circumnavigation. It wouldn't be setting off from here, coming down the Atlantic, around the Antarctic and back again, which, as I say, is a long way, but it's just not circumnavigation. Even if you call your autobiography Full Circle, it doesn't make it a circle. It's an odd teardrop shape down the side of the planet. So I've always been underwhelmed by the whole MacArthur thing, until just recently when I've seen these videos on YouTube about the flat Earth, and they keep showing this map, the azimuthal equidistant projection, and as soon as I saw that, I immediately thought of Ellen MacArthur, because if the Antarctic is this edge around the disk, and if she did sail around Antarctica, then she clearly did circumnavigate the Earth. And if the powers that be know that we live on a disk like this, then you can understand why they heaped so many awards upon her. She was given, she's been made a dame. Here she is receiving it from the richest human being that ever lived, whose name isn't Rothschild. There she is with the medal, and she received France's highest award as well, and plenty of other awards. She became a household name in the UK. So obviously someone puts a lot of store in what she did. So let's just imagine that we do live on a disk and that she did sail around the edge, and let's visualize that. If we say that she set off from Britain here and she sailed around Africa and around Antarctica, and this is rough because I'm using a trackball for this. We'll assume she didn't weave about so much, and we'll assume that she didn't take a shortcut across the Pacific and that she went all the way around here. Now it's not a circle, we've got this section here to account for, and we could work out the area of this with calculus, but since she started and finished from the same point, and since everything inside this journey is the habitable area available to us, let's just take it at face value and say that this was a circular journey, and use that to work out the area of this disk that we may or may not be on. So if we take the full circle, we need to know the circumference of the circle. We need to know the length of the journey. So we go to the font of all truth, Wikipedia, and we scroll down to her racing career, and here it is. The circumnavigation took 71.5 days, and it was 50,660 kilometres. So that's 50,660 kilometres was the circumference of the circle that she sailed. And if we know the radius of that circle, then we can work out the area. And we can work out the radius because we know the circumference, which was 50,660 kilometres. So let's get the calculator. 50,660 kilometres circumference, and we need to divide it by 2 pi. So over 2 times pi gives us a radius of 8,063 kilometres. So now that we've got that, we can go back to the area calculation, and it's pi r squared. So this is the radius, we square that, multiply by pi, and that gives us an area of 204,230,456 square kilometres. So how does that compare with the official size of the globe Earth? Go back to Wikipedia, scroll down to the size, and here we are, surface area 510,072,000 square kilometres, compared with what we just came up with, 204,230,000. This is less than half the official size of the globe. So it's a pretty rough and ready calculation. So I'm putting this out there for the big boys to have a look at. The flat earthers and the flat earth rebutters. People with more resources and more brain power with me should be able to use numbers like the length of journeys that people take when they say that they've circumnavigated the Earth, and you should be able to work out from that the actual physical size of either the disk or the globe that we live on. I don't think there's any conclusive proof either way, but at least this gives people something to work with. So that is for you guys to look at, really. But as an appendix, I just want to show you what Ellen MacArthur is up to these days, because she's retired from competitive sailing and she now has the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and as you can see, their mission is to accelerate the transition to a circular economy. And this is a glorified way of talking about recycling. It's just that you should use resources in such a way that you can reuse them endlessly, in theory, and keep putting them back into the system. So circular economy sort of seems a bit of a coincidence. And then when you look at the logo, 3 circles arranged in such a way that these 2 circles look a bit like a tube. So there's a tube coming through the outer circle, a three-dimensional circumpunct, an eccentric quasi-vulvic totem, looks like to me. So, and then just look at the circular economy overview. Everything circles, circles within circles. I don't know if that's telling us something, but circles do seem to play a large part in Ellen MacArthur's life these days. So there you go, professional flat earthers. See if you can do anything with this. And then just as one last word for people like Ellen MacArthur that are into the environment, if you want to do something about the environment, then recycling is one thing, but I think you really should start here. Do something about this, because I'm sick of looking up in the sky and seeing that every day, and I don't need some do-gooder telling me that I need to recycle in order for this to stop. So there you go, take what you can from it. Good luck with your calculations, everybody. Thanks for listening.
The Earth. Is it really just a big ball floating in space? Spinning on its axis at 1,000 miles per hour, hurtling around the sun at 67,000 miles per hour, whizzing through the Milky Way at a milk-curdling speed of over 500,000 miles per hour, and warp driving through the heaven at over 500 million miles per hour? And what about the sun? Is it really 93 million miles away and close to 1 million miles in diameter, with a circumference of nearly 3 million miles? And it's constantly illuminating half of our entire Earth's surface with the rotation of the Earth, creating our 24-hour days, our night and days? Or, shh, the Earth is flat. just like we experience. And maybe the sun isn't big, but is very small and very close, and not illuminating the Earth from 93 million miles, but is illuminating locally. And maybe everything, the sun, moon, and stars, are not far away, but are circling overhead relatively close. In this video, we're going to explore the latter option, and at the end, we're going to reveal startling evidence through the use of time-lapse photography that the sun cannot possibly be 93 million miles away, but is in fact very close and is illuminating locally as it traverses our flat Earth. Oh man, and watch how this sun comes at you. Boom! I mean, come on. And that's all perspective. If you look at jet trails, Google Images, you'll see them, they start out low at the horizon, they come up overhead. Look at that thing. They come up overhead and then they go down to the horizon. Perfectly explains what the sun would do. Here it is going overhead. I love time lapse. And look at this. You can't go out and look at the sun. You can't see this stuff, except that it's on, time lapse like this. It's incredible. Now watch this thing. It's sweeping. The sun over flat Earth is doing a big circle, right? Look at this thing. See it sweeping to the right? It's like a lefty bowler. Just toss that down the alley, and there it goes, hooking into the pocket. You can see how the clouds angle down to the horizon. I shot it there. That's exactly how the sun would do on flat Earth. Okay, back to the Copernican principle, and this is what they tell us. The sun is 93 million miles away. Now, I'm going to show you evidence through sunsets that shows the sun light following the sun over the horizon, and it shrinks as it goes over. Now, there's no way it would do that if the sun is 93 million miles away. Okay, first I'm going to show you some footage from the ISS. Okay, now watch this animation. Watch this sunset. Now this is exactly, if they came to me and said, do an animation, this is how I would do it. If the sun were 93 million miles away. Just like that. Have the whole horizon fade evenly. But that's not what we see. Okay, wow, look at that. Look how the light lifts off the ground like a big wedge, or like lifting up a sheet of paper. That's incredible footage. Definitely the light's following the sun, right? Okay, next I'm going to show you how a sun that is circling over the Earth, that creates the horizontal aspect of the sun. If you combine that with perspective, which creates the up and down of the sun, the rising and the setting, you get the 23.5 degree tilt that they talk about. It's nothing but perspective and the circling sun. Here's another sun sweeping out a big circle. Okay, here's a phenomenon that you might be wondering, how in the heck do you explain this on a flat Earth? Well, this footage is taken from Alaska during the summer, and the sun does look like it's going up and down. The reason it's doing that is that this town in Alaska is not in the center of the sun's circular circuit. In other words, the sun is making a big circle, and the town is not in the center of that circle. So the sun will be closer and further from the viewer with the camera. That will cause it to go higher and lower, and also maybe even bigger and smaller. Look at the high altitude airplane. Remember, this is from a high altitude balloon. So that airplane is probably at cruising altitude. Notice how it looks like it's going up from the horizon. That's exactly how the sun will rise, because that plane is staying parallel to the ground. And now watch, it'll go down to the other horizon. All right, again, perspective, that's how the sun will set. And forget the big ball, that's just due to a GoPro camera. But see how the sun, that's the point of this. And then also, look at the size of the sun, man. Look at that thing. I mean, there's something to it to say that we're higher up our view and the sun looks bigger, and it looks like it's not as high in the sky as it does when we're on the ground. Something to that. Let's explore this notion a bit further, that the sun looks bigger when filmed from higher up. The next 3 slides, I'm going to do a comparison, a side by side. The one on the left, the camera is above the clouds. The camera on the right is ground level. And the point for the side by side comparison from the ground level and the level above the clouds is that above the clouds we're only maybe a mile or so up, and if the sun appears to be closer to the camera, well, that means it's probably much closer, because if the sun were 93 million miles away, a mile closer wouldn't make any difference at all to its visual appearance. Okay, here's a little illustrator or a little cartoon from a website called timeanddate.com. It's really funny that they would have a perfect illustration of a sun rising and setting on a flat Earth due to perspective. You'll notice that it rises from below the horizon and sets below the horizon. Now you might be saying, well, how's that possible? I can see now you're saying that it rises and lowers due to perspective, but how does it disappear below the horizon? Well, I got a theory about that. Because of the fact that all parallel lines and planes converge at your eye-level horizon, this is according to the perspective, I'm not making this up, if in fact, and they do, they converge at your eye-level horizon visually, then it makes sense that after that point, they diverge, meaning they then separate. So the sun would continue on a downward track. As you can see from my illustration here, the lines would go to your horizon, and then afterwards they would spread out and separate, kind of like a starburst, and the starburst being at your horizon, at your focal point. Anyway, without further ado, we're going to start talking about, and I'm going to start showing you the time lapse of the sunsets that I'm talking about that clearly show the sun is close and illuminating locally. Here we go. All right, and here are a couple of time-lapse sunsets, and just like the sunrises at the beginning of this video where you could see the sun coming at you, not maintaining any 93 million mile distance, here you can also see the sun moving away, and it's clearly not due to the rotation of the Earth and a sun that's maintaining 93 million miles away, but the sun is moving over the Earth and moving away from you. Okay, these next three slides, the sun is almost set already behind the horizon, but watch as the sunlight shrinks and follows the sun. It's definitely a locally illuminating sun, not far away, not very big, and definitely not 93 million miles away. Okay, remember this video from the beginning of the video? I showed you this one and how it's circling over the Earth, and watch it sweep to the right like a bowler bowling it in there for a strike. Okay, now I want you to pay attention to the way the light follows the sun. The sunlight's going to shrink, right, as it follows the locally illuminating sun. Now watch this. See it shrinking, following the sun? You do not get that if the sun is 93 million miles away. The entire horizon should fade evenly, just like this supposed shot taken from space of the Earth. You can clearly see the way they depict it. They depict the demarcation between day and night, or light and dark, as a long straight line. and you can see the long straight line moving as one solid piece. That means that the sunset should all fade, the entire horizon should fade evenly, but that's not what we observe, as we will see and as we've seen in the footage so far. The sunlight shrinks and follows the sun over the horizon. So these time-lapse sunsets are definitely the nail in the coffin for heliocentrism. But this particular one here, shot from above the clouds from this observatory, is the final nail in the coffin. Look at how the sun just shrinks and the light shrinks to nothing. That cannot happen, as I showed you in the when the sun illuminates the entire Earth, which it does from 93 million miles away. It has to. You don't get this isolated look at the sunlight trailing the sun. That's only possible with a small sun, close, not very high, illuminating locally. I mean, if this isn't proof to you, then you gotta take the blinders off. Okay, and finally I want to show you some examples of local illumination, or a city in the background. This is from Grand Canyon National Park. You can see Las Vegas is one of them. You can see the stars going down, so you know that's not the sun. That's the glow of Las Vegas, it says. You can see that's local illumination. I'm just making an example showing you here's Tuba City and a little bit of Flagstaff. Now, in this one here, you see two lights. Obviously, we don't have two suns, but these are two cities lit up, and it's just to show it looks just like the sun going over the horizon. That's the point of me showing that. That's local illumination at work. The sun is not 93 million miles away, because if it was, the entire horizon would fade evenly, and the entire horizon would fade at the same time. Not what we see here, which is the small sun cruising over the Earth and the light is following it. Case closed.
And you know this. For years, Neil Armstrong refused to be interviewed. I found that to be one of the strangest things of anything. You would think that the first man on the moon, the national hero that he is, would have talked to everyone about the experience, about the wonder. That didn't happen.
His role model was Lindbergh, and Lindbergh became a very public person and was very much out there with his political views and all that. You'd think that Neil would have at least wanted to be a role model for the next generation. Instead, he became essentially a recluse, a hermit. And on every anniversary, they would wind him up and trot him out in public. The most interesting one was during the Clinton years at the White House on the 25th anniversary, where, do you remember what Armstrong said, the most stunning thing that an astronaut could say, and I think in this milieu get away with it?
Give us the quote.
Well, he said two things. At the start of his speech, he compared himself and the other astronauts to birds, to parrots. And he then made a joke and he said, and parrots don't fly very well. Well, what else do parrots do, George?
They repeat what they're told.
Plant his foot on the surface of the moon has been a pioneer in many ways. And Mr. Armstrong, in asking you to come to the podium, may I say that millions of Americans have admired you not only for your achievement, but for the quiet dignity with which you have conducted yourself and represented not only our country, but humankind. Ladies and gentlemen, Neil Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, Mr. President, members of Congress, fellow astronauts, ladies and gentlemen. Wilbur Wright once noted that the only bird that could talk was the parrot, and he didn't fly very well. So I'll be brief. This week, America has been recalling the Apollo program and reliving the memories of those times in which so many of us here, colleagues here in the first rows, were immersed. Our old astrogeology mentor, Gene Shoemaker, even called in one of his comets to mark the occasion with spectacular Jovian fireworks. And reminding us once again of the power and consequence of celestial extracurricular activities. Many Americans were part of Apollo, about 1 or 2 in each 1,000 citizens, all across the country. They were asked by their country to do the impossible, to envisage, to design, and to build a method of breaking the bonds of Earth's gravity, and then sally forth and visit another heavenly body. The principal elements, leaving Earth, navigating in space, and descending to a planet unencumbered with runways and traffic controls, would include the major requirements necessary for a spacefaring people. Today, a space shuttle flies overhead with an international crew. A number of countries have international space programs. During the space age, we have increased the knowledge of our universe 1,000-fold. Today we have with us a group of students among America's best. To you, we say, we have only completed a beginning. We leave you much that is undone. There are great ideas undiscovered, breakthroughs available to those who can remove one of truth's protective layers. There are places to go beyond belief. Those challenges are yours. In many fields, not the least of which is space, because there lies human destiny.
Your idealistic faces riveted on the first man on the moon, talking to them, and he looked at them and he said, "There are wonders beyond belief."
Let's go Delta Scion.
Haven't gotten to 1 minute warning yet. One minute. Delta Psi. Push to test. Wrong side showing. Prime. Igniter ready light. Pre-cool on. Igniter idle. 20 seconds to launch. Everything checks here.
Your position is good, Joe.
Pump idle. Good pump. Good igniter. Ready to launch now. Good light. Okay.
This is the X-15 research aircraft, designed to investigate the problems of manned flight in a near-space environment. Altitudes up to 50 miles, speeds up to Mach 6. High-speed aerodynamics, aerodynamic heating, Structural design, aircraft stability, and control in space and re-entry. This was the kind of information it was to provide, and provided it did. Here's the story. 57,000 pounds of thrust with a throttle attached. No engine like this had ever existed before, but Thiokol built one for the X-15. Now, what kind of airframe could be designed to carry such an engine?
The X-15 was designed and built to take the stresses encountered at hypersonic speeds, to go to extreme high altitude and to beat the heat, survive the extreme high temperatures that build up on the wing, fuselage, and tail during the re-entry to the Earth's atmosphere. The engineering research contribution we made at North American Aviation to the X-15 project was to take NASA's proposal to build this aircraft and to find out how they could be met.
Harrison Storms. He was in charge of the X-15 program at North American Aviation. The X-15 and its B-52 launch aircraft were ready. North American test pilot Scott Crossfield was ready. Step by step, the X-15 research project had moved to this important event. Now, the first of 3 X-15s was about to begin a series of test flights. The schedule called for an orderly progression of tests. In the first flights, the X-15 would remain attached to the B-52. Then a glide flight would be tried. Only then would powered flight be attempted. This careful program of flight tests, flown by pilot Scott Crossfield, proved the X-15 would do just what its designers hoped she would.
From March 10th, 1959 until late in 1960, when we delivered the 3rd aircraft to the Air Force, I made 14 captive flights, 1 glide flight, and 10 powered flights. It was all pretty much routine. We, North American that is, went up there to check out the aircraft. To check out the systems, to see how she handled and whether or not she'd meet the specs before we turned her over to the Air Force.
The pilot also goes through what is called trouble school, where failure of one or more of the X-15's major systems is simulated. Again, his reaction is monitored. Each pilot gets further practice by making a number of flights in a modified F-104 aircraft. He flies over his upcoming X-15 flight course to establish geographic checkpoints and key altitudes in the landing pattern. The range consists of a master station at Edwards and radar stations at Ely, Nevada and at Beatty. The flight corridor is 50 miles wide, and it contains a number of dry lake beds where emergency landings can be made. 2 kinds of powered flights are made over the high range. One, a ballistic type, high altitude run up to and even above 250,000 feet. And 2, a high speed run made at a lower altitude, usually 60 to 70,000 feet. During his practice flights in the F-104, the pilot must also familiarize himself with the timing and positioning for an X-15 landing at both primary and alternate landing sites. And he makes practice landings, using predetermined settings that can simulate the low lift-drag ratio of the X-15. Nothing is left to chance, in the air or on the ground.
These precautions paid off during the following flight, when the pilot realized he could only get 30% power, and that consequently he would have to make an emergency landing at Mud Lake.
Ready to launch. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
That's a good light. That's a good light.
On a hot day, more than 12,000 feet of runway is required to achieve liftoff at 170 to 180 knots. Snugly tucked in the X-15 cockpit, the pilot is no doubt recalling the good old days before wing mounting, when he had to squeeze into the cockpit down through the bomb bay. This maneuver was accompanied by considerable huffing and puffing, and a big sigh of relief when he was finally strapped in the seat. Nothing to do now but sit back, relax, mentally help the B-52 pilot with his flying. Wing mounting of the X-15 permits the ejection seat to be utilized in an emergency, while the aircraft is still attached to the B-52 shackles. Launch checks continue as the pilot tests the attitude control rocket. The high-altitude control system used when the X-15 is on an altitude flight profile above the usable atmosphere. At extremely high altitudes, the conventional aerodynamic control surfaces are not sufficiently responsive for complete flight control. So attitude control rockets are necessary. Pitch and yaw rockets are located in the nose. The roll rockets are located on each wingtip. The underside of the X-15 is now building up a coating of frost on the outside of the liquid oxygen tank due to the intense cold of the liquid oxygen at a temperature of minus 300 degrees Fahrenheit. The auxiliary power units are now started. Note the exhaust trail going over the horizontal stabilizer. Launch. Slight roll-off occurs as the shackles release. The X-15 engine is started, and the aircraft accelerates rapidly, quickly leaving the B-52 far behind. On this flight, the plan called for a buildup of 1,500 pounds per square foot of dynamic pressure before pull-up. Again the launch. Photographed by X-15 camera number 1. Note the rapid acceleration as the aircraft drops away from the B-52, and the steep climb-out angle. Speed brakes are extended to permit longer burning time of the engine propellants and provide added aircraft stability during re-entry. Peak altitude of 317,000 feet planned for this flight is now achieved. X-15 camera number 5 shows the pilot's reaction to zero-G state. Camera number 6 shows the control panel and the weightless condition. Note the pages on the pilot's flight checklist. The planned peak altitude accomplished, the aircraft starts on the downhill side of the parabola. As the descent angle increases, the horizon gradually disappears out of the picture. Now the pull-out to level flight, and the horizon once again is seen behind the tail of the aircraft. The pilot banks the X-15 to visually judge for himself the landing site relative to his position. The speed brakes close and the pilot guides the aircraft into an approach pattern for a landing on Rogers Dry Lake.
The X-15 research project has long since achieved its original goals. The aircraft has been flown successfully more than 120 times, and although setting new records wasn't its purpose, it has set a few along the way. Altitude, 67 miles. Speed, Mach 6, 4,104 miles an hour, the highest and fastest a winged aircraft has ever flown. Today, the X-15 moves on to further accomplishment. But now the Thoroughbred has become a workhorse, carrying a heavy payload of instruments, undertaking studies of the near-space environment possible before only with unmanned satellite and rocket-borne probes. There are many people who should share the credit for the continuing success of the X-15 research project. But perhaps they will understand if we seem to focus on those who have actually flown the many research aircraft since the X-1. By saluting these courageous men, we also pay homage to all the others who have helped us move step by step, deeper and deeper, into the unknown outskirts of space.
This guy, basically reached out and says, look, I'm in the military and I might be able to help prove the Earth is not a globe, not a sphere, could be flat, and he's got stuff to back it up. So it is my personal pleasure to introduce an active member of the United States Navy. His name is Robert. He is a NATO Sea Sparrow, and correct me as I'm doing this, NATO Sea Sparrow Surface Missile System Instructor. He's a master training specialist, and he's here, tonight to confirm three things, for this movement. One is, from everything he has observed during the last tour, there is nothing, absolutely no curvature to the Earth that he can determine. Two, there is no Coriolis effect taken into account with the ranged weapon systems he has been working with over the years. Three, the navigation systems currently being used by the United States Navy on the high seas, when you compare them to basic trigonometry, and he'll break it down for you, seem to be completely wrong. And there's many other points besides that, and wow, I'm just blown away that he is here. Robert, are you there with us?
I was in the same crowd as everybody else at one point, where I was kind of, the naysayer, like, let me go ahead and show them all these quote unquote proofs that I have that makes them crazy. And,
so you started as a debunker like everybody else.
Pretty much. I really, I came into it with a really bad attitude, basically going on, the lines of, I already know this, I know because someone told me.
On the seas, that there were certain things that were going on that didn't make sense to you. And I kind of want to go through them one by one. The first thing was you were mentioning to me about ships that you tracked in the distance. It's okay.
For anyone that doesn't know, max observable distance, roughly, for the horizon out to sea is about 15 to 18 nautical miles, depending upon humidity and dew point and all of that. I've actually been outside with binoculars, with high-powered telescopic devices. We have access to certain things like that. And as a ship is perceived to be dropping below the quote-unquote horizon, all you got to do is zoom in on it, and all of a sudden, poof, the bottom of the ship where it meets the water is back in observance again. And this doesn't add up, because at 15 nautical miles, there's several feet to be dropped around a curved Earth.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't add up at all. Our fire control radar, we actually use a 2-degree pencil beam. It's very, very tight beam, so there's very little room for deviation on that, and it's a direct line of sight radar.
Okay.
And we're able to track targets up to 50 nautical miles away, and on a curved Earth, that just doesn't add up.
Followed the Chicago skyline.
I have 60 miles away across Lake Michigan. Yep, they can see the whole city.
There you go. So this is collaborating that, which he's saying he can track targets at 50 miles away, which should be about 1,700 if you round up, 1,700 feet below the horizon. But you're hitting them just fine. Wow.
And we're tracking them just fine, and it just doesn't add up. You can do simple trigonometry on it with elevation angle, and everything works out, and you don't drop the track. You can track it quite a bit of a distance out.
We're talking about line of sight targeting or GPS for the projectile, for the missile.
For the missile, it's line of sight targeting. That's basically, like I said earlier, we track the target with a illuminator, and it's basically just another piece of gear that's tied into ours. And once we lock up on the target, we are line of sight pointing straight at it, because it's a 2-degree pencil beam. It has to be pointing straight at it, because if it's not going to see it. It's not a search radar. It's a fire control radar. If you're supposedly looking at something, 50 nautical miles away around a huge curve, it's just you can't punch through the ocean with RF.
But the point is that the 2-inch beam, you have to have it on there for most of the trip. That thing's
Not
out
most,
there.
all of it, pretty much.
Okay, all the trip, except for the last couple seconds, if that. You can pull it off if you had to.
If you absolutely had to, but you have to understand, if it's not close enough, if you pull it off, the missile will go ballistic on its last update, and it might not hit the target.
Got it. And so if what you're basically saying is this 2-inch beam, which you're painting the target with, is, you guys, when you're firing this thing out there, you do not account for curvature. That beam shouldn't be able to reach a target at a certain at whatever at 50 miles, should not be able to hit that target.
Yeah, and this is a perfect thing, and I'm really glad that I was fortunate enough to work on this, because the argument always is, well, we can reach over a curve because we're a search radar and we use atmospherics and bounce off different parts of the atmosphere, and then it comes back down. Okay. Now, see, the problem with that is this can't happen with a 2-degree pencil beam. The angle of this cannot put RF up into an atmosphere and then bounce it back down and then expect to get it back so we can properly track.
It's too precise.
Yeah. It's too precise. It can't do that.
Yeah. Wow.
Last little topic that I wanted to mention about that specifically is some of our search radars boast distances of being able to track stuff like over 200 miles away. So take that into consideration for supposed curvature. This is something to think about. 200
miles, yeah. I haven't even looked at the thing at 200 miles, but that's a massive distance. That's I think that's a full blown mile below the horizon if the world was actually round.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not mistaken. Which, you shouldn't be able to hit it. Should not, unless again what you're talking about, bouncing it off something, which what you're saying it does not do. Let me ask something else, because you and I hadn't really, and again, if you can't talk about that, that's fine. But yeah, you specialize in the Sea Sparrow surface missile system, but you probably have had exposure to all sorts of different weapon systems from the ship point of view, both short range and maybe even a few that are longer range. Do you guys compare notes? I mean, do you kind of see the same sort of thing where everything's consistent? It's not like one system is using curvature and the other system isn't. Nobody's using curvature on anything, as far as you know.
As far as I know, we do not. I'm glad you mentioned that, because other systems, if you want to compare them, the only thing we feed into our systems at all, and it's only on a plane system, we have this piece of equipment, and I'm sure quite a few people are familiar with this, but we use gyros, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And these gyros are powered on our ship, and basically they stay stationary once they're spooled up, and we have to power them up before we get underway.
Yeah.
And this information from this gyro is fed into all of our radar systems and all of our weapon systems, and all they account for is the pitch and roll of our ship. So we can account and send that information to, compensate. Like if our ship takes a huge roll, it compensates our weapon system to aim higher, if need be. And if you look at the coordinate system for that, there's no curvature in that at all. It's just a plain model.
That's great. So basically what he's saying there, folks, in case you've missed anything yet, is that there are no weapon systems currently in the U.S. Navy that are using curvature, or the Coriolis effect. It's something we've suspected for a little while now, but nobody's actually said it.
I was going to ask you, because you were talking about earlier about the optics that you have, from binoculars to, I guess, specialized equipment that only the military has. I was wondering, can you see at a greater distance at night than daytime? And the reason I ask you this is because basically our human eye only sees what's reflected or refracted off of objects, right? Can you basically see further at night, whether it's other ships or other objects?
I'll put it to you this way: on my tour on board that ship, I stood a few different watches. I can't go into detail with what they were. We electronically could see different ships that were like 20, 25, 30 nautical miles away. And I've been outside and I've seen with infrared cameras, where there's no haze, none of that stuff. I've literally seen ships 25, 27 nautical miles away.
Wow. And infrared, that's not something, that's not mirage material there.
I looked out in that distance, I went outside, and I could see it, and I was amazed. Not like in the essence of, all of a sudden I thought we were on a flat world, because I didn't think that way at the time.
Yeah.
But I was amazed in the fact that we were always pounded in the head with, the horizon's only 15 to 18 nautical miles, over and over and over again. And that's what we were always force-fed.
So it was
it's in our training.
So it was this nagging thing in the back of your head going, wait, I can only see 15 to 18 nautical miles, but I'm seeing a ship at 27.
Yeah.
Almost double, and I can see it, and I'm seeing it with infrared, which means it's actually there. It's not, mirages don't give off big heat signatures or some little, you were mentioning kind of some inconsistencies with practical math versus how the ship actually gets from point A to point B.
Yes. One of the things that always struck a chord with me looking back on it is how long it actually took us to get to different parts of the world. Meaning, specifically, if the Earth was a globe, we should be able to take, a spherical trajectory to a destination, and that's, anyone that knows anything about, math will know that the hypotenuse is always the shorter distance. And that spherical attribute to it, we should get to a said destination based upon how fast we're going, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And that should play into it, and that should be all that you have to take into consideration. Whenever you look at it, these distances sometimes take much shorter of a time, or sometimes they take a lot longer, depending upon where we're going in the world. There's nothing to account for that, because I can tell you, we know how fast our ship goes, and when we're at a steady cruise speed and nothing's changing it, and we're not stopping for any reason, other than to do boxes out at sea, we do a whole lot of boxes. And sometimes looking back on that, I always wondered why we did that. And a lot of it has to do with, I think, trying to mask how long it actually takes us to get to certain places.
Explain real quick. Sorry, I have to back up. The boxes. Explain that for the layman that's never heard that.
And this is something people can look up to. We basically, depending upon where our area of responsibility is, wherever in the world, we'll just kind of sit in an area and just do boxes out in the sea. Like, we'll just do circles, like over and over and over again.
Wow.
Okay. But you're saying that sometimes you suspect that sometimes when you guys are just going in circles, it's because you want to kind of mask the fact that the destination is going to be off.
Yes, I honestly, looking back on that, that's what I surmise. And, I'm not trying to get into the speculation side of it. I'm trying to bring forth truths.
Sure.
And that is my speculation, I'll be fair. But it makes perfect sense when you actually think about it, because when you look at it and compare it to other evidence like southern hemispherical travel by airplane, stuff like that, like you said, how they just fall off the face of the world pretty much.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
Yeah.
It adds up, If you look at it and you compare facts with facts, it makes perfect sense. There's not a whole lot of room to account for that, because when we're cruising and we got a mission to do, we're cruising. We're not lollygagging around. We're staying full speed.
Yeah.
And based upon the distance, and I've mapped it out before, the east coast of the United States over to the Mediterranean, and it should have took a certain amount of time, and it ended up taking, less time than that. And I'm like, how is that possible? Because we don't go faster than that.
And when you say less time, you mean by days or
by
hours?
Days?
By days.
What?
So you're supposed to be there on Friday and you show up on a Tuesday type of thing?
Well, not that crazy, but
bad.
but bad. It's quite a bit off. And I've been on deployments before where we have a max speed and we can't break that speed by limitation. We've gotten there earlier, and I'm like, I've made this trip before going across the pond, the Atlantic Ocean, and it took us 2 weeks.
Yeah.
As where I've went across it before, and it took us a week and 5 days.
Whoa! Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Then I think, people would be going, what happened? Is there something wrong with the engines? They'd be checking every piece of equipment in that thing. But that's amazing. Yeah, I don't even know what to make of that yet. Because there's especially with ships, there's a real limitation on speed. It doesn't matter what you put into the engines. You could hook up nitros all you want. It's not going to help you. You were saying that when you're south of the equator, you ran into things that kind of fit in with the models that we've been discussing for the last 6-7 months, which is distances seem to be out of whack when you get on a globe it's south of the equator, but on a flat map it's out in the outer ring. Is that something can you elaborate on that?
It's something that actually makes perfect sense to me, because it actually took longer a lot of times to get to an area whenever we are tracking and making sure that we're on a proper course to get to a certain area like Costa Rica or Guyana or Suriname or something like that. It took a lot longer to get there than what I thought it was going to, because they said, oh yeah, we go such and such fast, and I'm like, I've looked this up in retrospect, how long it's actually plotted to be. And it should have taken about 3 or 4 days less than what it actually took.
Oh, I got you.
So it was much longer.
Yeah, which is what we've been looking at.
But by the way, Mark, I'm terrible with that equation that everybody talks about.
Which one?
The
curvature?
For calculating the curvature of the Earth. I was trying to explain it to my son today.
It is 8 inches per mile squared. So when you hear that, it sounds wrong. And Sean knows. I'm sorry, Robert knows this one. Crap. Where it is 8 inches times every mile. Every mile times itself. So at mile 2. It's 2 times 2, which is 4, times 8 inches, which is 32 inches. 3 times 3, 3 miles is 3 times 3 is 9 times 8 inches, which is 72 inches.
That's the second mile? The second mile is...
Well, the first mile is nothing. It's just 8 inches.
Okay.
The second mile is 2 times 2 times 8. The third mile is 3 times 3 times 8, 4 times